And today, as we heard in Geneva, is the third round of trilateral talks between the U.S., Ukraine, and Russia. Joining us now for analysis is Rebecca Grant, Ph.D., Vice President of the Lexington Institute, as well as a national security analyst. Rebecca, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining. It seems like EU membership may be on the table, but not NATO membership for Ukraine. In order to overcome that, Zelensky is pushing hard for these U.S.-backed security guarantees, and he wants them to be ratified by our Congress before he says he'll agree to any concessions. He's citing the Budapest Memorandum as the justification for his ask. What is the lesson he's referring to with the Budapest Memorandum?
Oh, and it's a sad lesson indeed, where the U.S. guaranteed Ukraine's security back in, I think it was 1994, in order for Ukraine to complete giving up the old Soviet nuclear weapons. I think they look back on that now with a lot of regret, thinking that retaining those weapons might have prevented a Russian invasion. That's rewriting history. But I think we see here a Zelensky who's been very agreeable about the negotiations, kind of trying to really stomp hard on getting the U.S. security guarantees. Now, there is no question EU membership for Ukraine is a very big deal. It's something he sought for a long time, and it's the centerpiece of the economic recovery package, which is what is supposed to make it okay for Ukraine to accept some territorial giveaways to Russia if Putin will agree to a ceasefire.
And you mentioned these economic guarantees. The U.S., of course, has made economic investments in Ukraine, and that's supposed to be sort of an economic security guarantee. But those are rare earth investments, and those mines, they're not necessarily in the population centers. So what level of guarantees are feasible for the U.S. to provide?
Yeah, and it's such a tough question because for President Trump, and he's right about this, he wants to have a prosperous Ukraine going forward, whatever the final boundaries are, and thinks because, he's a businessman, a real estate man, he thinks that, hey, a few years from now, you'll be really glad that you've got this path to prosperity. Zelensky, understandably, who suffered yet another attack last night, 400 drones, missiles mixed in, he wants those hard military security guarantees, and who can blame him? And it's true, even if there was a ceasefire tomorrow, Ukraine will have this almost 800-mile front to defend, which is why they will need, U.S. M1 Abrams tanks, they'll need F-35s, they'll need the Patriot air defenses they already have. Those are going to be needed all up and down Europe to contain Russia.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, another attack last night, and we see this repeatedly. They're negotiating while overnight Putin is sending in these attacks. So, and then Trump, of course, putting pressure on Ukraine to accept the deal as is. Seems like he wants to just get something in place so that the fighting can stop immediately. But you mentioned the lesson of 1994. So what is the tipping point that you think makes a deal happen?
It's really all about what Putin and Russia will agree to. Ukraine has, over the last several months, been very agreeable, willing to do whatever it takes for peace. And it just comes down to know what is going to make Putin stop. Putin loves this war. He is using it to keep himself in power. He's got gray zone harassment of other European allies going on all the time. And he's an incredibly dangerous person because, of course, he's backed up by China, who is allowing this war to continue. So it's up to these negotiators to find what it is that will make Putin agree even to a ceasefire. And I think Trump needs to go back to that weapon from last summer, and that is the secondary sanctions on China. That got Putin on the plane to Alaska. It's time to think about some more pressure on China as yet another way to pressure Putin to agree to a ceasefire.
Yeah, the last time we spoke, I asked you that question. Does China have to come to the table and make these quadrilateral talks for anything to truly get to that tipping point that we're all looking for?
I'd be surprised to see China sitting at that table, but there's no question that Xi Jinping could put the pressure on Putin if he wants to. But China, again, I think this war in Ukraine fulfills their purposes. So there's got to be pain, economic pain for China. I think there has to be continued military pressure on Russia, with Ukraine striking legitimate military targets. And most of all, and this is happening, we've got to see NATO and the West holding firm in guaranteeing security for Ukraine and continuing to supply what they need to keep up this fight. The European allies are all in. They still say as long as it takes. So we've got to hold firm there. And I agree, apply some more pressure on China. It's gonna take something more than what we've done so far to get this to a deal.
Is the next major milestone on the path happening in these trilateral talks today, or are they happening, as you say, sort of outside, putting pressure on China, et cetera?
I think both. And, the negotiating team of Ambassador Witkoff, who was fantastic, Jared Kushner, Kirill Dmitriev from the Russian side, they've never stopped meeting. They've met in multiple cities straight through from December. The move to the trilateral talks is a good format, but it may be that Putin is just playing this out. But I think Trump's idea here is that if he keeps at the negotiations, there will be a breakthrough at some point. It's just been so difficult because since Putin likes the war, it's been hard to incentivize him. Meanwhile, Russia's economy is going down the tank. They're a vassal state to China. Another thing they can do is additional pressure on those illegal Russian oil sales and the shadow fleet. If we start going after their shadow fleet, that may also be additional pressure on Putin.
Yeah, it seems like some pressure needs to be applied that he will actually respond to. And Rebecca, as we start to finish up, I just want to take a step back and discuss, certainly with Midnight Hammer and the Maduro capture, that featured new U.S. military capabilities. And that certainly changed the geopolitical landscape. But the Russia-Ukraine war has also shown the application of new military advancements and technological deployments of troops, AI, drones. How significant has this war been in shifting how warfare is discussed in general and how it will go into the geopolitical landscape in the next decade?
Well, U.S. air and space power, as Operation Midnight Hammer demonstrated, is the best. It's the final answer. Nobody has the B-2. But that said, the Pentagon is very active in learning lessons about drone warfare. There's a drone competition right now called Operation Gauntlet, where Secretary of War Hegseth has 25 different drone makers competing to provide those smaller one-way attack drones. So no question, we're learning those lessons. But a lot of the lessons are ones we already knew. You need tanks to hold land. You need the new M1E3 Abrams. You need air power over that. The Ukraine war has been a little bit of a different battlefield without air power and without the real combined operations you see from the U.S. side. So not to worry, U.S. is still the dominant military power.
Now, the strategies remain the same, but the tactics are evolving quickly. Rebecca Grant, thank you so much for sharing your analysis today.
Thank you.